Hey, everybody. Welcome to NovusNorth Expert Series, a forum where we discuss all things related to experience, financial services, and technology with thought leaders from across the industry. Today, I'm really excited to introduce Amaresh Tripathy. He's an established leader in the analytics, machine learning, and AI space. He's led high growth businesses at companies like PwC, Genpact, and is currently, and this was new to me, even though I've known Amaresh for some time, is an adjunct professor and chairman of the board at the School of Data Science at UNC Charlotte, something I think is perfect for Amaresh. So thank you, Amaresh, for joining us. And maybe you could share a little bit about yourself.
Absolutely. No, thank you so much, Dave. Always fun and pleasure to kind of have a conversation, chat, and exchange ideas and bounce off ideas. I think you probably kind of covered the highlights of it. So basically, I've been in this whole data, AI, analytics. I mean, it goes through different names and everything, but with every generation here, but been in this space for more than 25 years now. That was my education background. I actually did my entire graduate thesis was in this whole area of not machine learning and neural networks, and obviously that has evolved. And then I got waylaid, and I became a management consultant somewhere along the way. And then sooner or later, I kind of realized, hey, listen, I kind of how do I blend both? So, and basically for past 20 years or so, I started building out data analytics business within large consulting professional services firms. That's kind of became a thing for me. Uh, so kind of ended up through an acquisition at PricewaterhouseCoopers, and when I got an opportunity to run their analytics business eventually. But before that, I had kind of like asset-based consulting models, kind of building products. We've kind of done a whole host of things within that broader theme, and then did a lot of work in healthcare, consumer goods, some financial services. And then you and I obviously met at Genpact, and that's kind of where we intersected, and kind of I joined Genpact to run their data analytics business, and that was a wild and fun ride for both of us. And then kind of to my latest avatar, which is kind of AuxoAI, which is an AI-based firm. I mean, there's the whole inflection point of what's going on in AI, and kind of wanted to do it in a slightly different way of in a smaller company and setting it up and building it up. And that's kind of just started the AuxoAI journey for us. But yeah, apart from that, as I said, I'm involved fairly with the academia. I'm kind of fairly deeply involved in the academia way, and I've always been. And yeah, that's a little. I live in Charlotte and have two wonderful kids, and my wife is a physician, and we always debate about how AI is going to impact doctors, and which is always a fun conversation. It seems like you have conversations at home too.
I'm sure there's some strong opinions on that.
But there are some strong opinions, yes, absolutely. Again, it's going to enhance. We already see that.
Yeah, how fabulous. Well, you hit on OXO AI. Love to learn a little bit more about what you're doing with this great new adventure.
Yeah. So I mean, if you really step back, I mean, at the root of all the stuff at least I've done over the last uh, 2 decades or more is around how do you actually change decision making? How do you actually make AI or data science real in an organization? And we made a lot of progress, but we are far, far away from an enterprise perspective of where it needs to be or what the promise is. Right? I mean, we've been talking about it since at least like the 90s. Yeah. And this is also guys other angle and take at going after the same problem. Right? I mean, if you're almost dedicated your soul to trying to find new angles at it, and the angle that we have taken is let's not anchor around use cases, anchor around people, right? And you obviously fundamentally believe in that idea is anchor around personas and people and build tools for them, right? And so we fundamentally have, if you really think about it, is it's we are an AI company, but we are actually a humanizing AI company, not really kind of okay, just kind of automate everything out kind of thing. And the purpose for that is, I think at an enterprise, the next level of step function change will, our belief is, will come from that. So which is where we kind of go and anchor on this concept of AI companions, or AI co-pilots, which is like for a salesperson, for a nurse, for an actuary, for a pricing analyst, for every job role and every job function will have an AI companion. And we want to be, and that's how I think AI will scale in an enterprise. And we want to be the company which builds the platform technology and the capability to kind of make that happen. That's basically kind of what AuxoAI is about.
No, that's super interesting, and I think in in a world I think right now that's flush with thousands of companies chasing use cases, I think that's a very interesting and to me, as you said, kind of an approach that resonates, feels more natural to me than sort of these point insertions in use cases kind of all over the place. So I love that.
Yeah. Absolutely. It makes it a little bit challenging. There are different challenges around that, but still some of the technology stack is the same. Whether you use like whether you what kind of LLM model are you going to use? Are you going to use OpenAI or Llama 2, or what options will you have? How will you fine tune it? Will you do kind of retrieval augmentation of the models? I mean, they're all kind of technology kind of questions we're trying to answer, and we have a platform to kind of do that. But more importantly, like what is the decision flow? We call this decision flow. What is the decision that a person makes throughout the day, right? What are the activities? And most knowledge work activities are about, hey, I want to sequence the work that I want to do in the right way. I want to actually do the work, which is a lot of it is finding information, summarizing information, or I need to kind of fill out the paperwork and update systems. I mean, it's kind of a lot of the work that all of us do. Uh, and so, how do you actually kind of make that easier so that nurse can spend more time with the patients, and actually can actually more start thinking about underwriting rather than reading documents? A salesperson can focus on building relationships, which is the super part, versus thinking about updating SFDC or who to contact. That's essentially kind of what we're trying to enable.
You can free them up. And I want to come back to the personas and the copilot idea, but you took us down a path I'd like to dig into just a little bit more. You mentioned OpenAI and Llama 2. We'd love to understand sort of your perspective on the place for, and maybe how you guys use them, the place for uh, the various LLMs and technologies, as well as kind of where you fit in the stack and how you guys are navigating that.
Yeah. I mean, so my perspective on kind of just kind of what happened, and then I'll ask kind of how we are using it, how we think. I mean, in a broader scheme of things, it was nice. Uh, but there's one big takeaway. There's like, I mean, obviously, we can talk about corporate governance, we can talk about leadership, we can talk about all kinds of things. Better people do that. Big takeaway for me personally, and for us from our perspective, if you go and see the root of what actually was happening, it's a debate between uh, how fast should we go with commercializing some of the technologies of things that we understand kind of, but not completely, right? Which tells me GPT-5 is going to blow our minds even more than what GPT-4 does. I mean, that's basically where it is. I mean, you can argue what is good, what is bad, like who's the win, who won through that and others, but basically the next release is going to be even more shocking. Right? That's the big takeaway for us. And I think it is going to kind of add the technical reality versus organization, like the technical promise versus the organization reality. It's going to even widen the gap even further, right? And if you really think about firms like AuxoAI, us, we actually are in that gap. We are trying to understand the technical realities of, or technical potential of things that are kind of coming in, whether it's through OpenAI, whether it's through a lot of other open source kind of great tools like Llama 2 or a Falcon. And I mean, there's some amazing kind of large language models, but also the entire stack that is developing, right? I mean, thinking around prompting. I mean, that was like there's a whole term that has just kind of come up literally in a year ago, right? But there's nothing there. And there are tools like LangChain, which is like a lot of orchestration things. Those things didn't exist a year ago. And all of those kind of tools, and how do you actually make sense of it and put it in some sort of a coherent way in a platform? Eventually, I think it will become more and more standardized, but right now it is not. And to kind of to meet the enterprise to take the technology promise and make it enterprise real, you need to stitch it all things together, which is kind of the one thing we do, which is kind of build that platform. But then you only how do you take that platform and make it real in context of individuals and people who are, and make their jobs better. That's the whole Copilot and the whole AI companion story. Those are the two things we do. We have a platform, and then we kind of do that. And within that platform, we are fairly certain everything will change over a period of time. So how can you create it modular enough that, okay, if it is not OpenAI thing or chip 3.5 or certainly Falcon is a lot more better than that, How do I kind of switch it very, very easily? Because your cost curves also change based on volume. So there are a lot of things that you need to kind of start thinking about from an economic value that an enterprise cares about and translate that into technology. So that translation layer, we essentially try to make it easier for enterprises through that platform, and then obviously drive value through the capabilities that that platform can provide. That's essentially kind of where we focus on. Having said that, OpenAI is an amazing company and is kind of probably the best models even right now. I mean, especially GPT-4. It has some very, very good models. There are some trade-offs kind of worth thinking about. But having said that, 6 months from now, will it remain the same? We almost certainly know it won't remain the same. So it will evolve. And our job is to make sure our enterprise clients they focus on the value to be delivered rather than the technical the minutia, which we can probably insulate them from.
Interesting. And you made, I think, what's an important point that maybe the folks not as close to it don't get, which is in all of the models today, they all have usage-based commercial terms.
Yes.
So kind of, managing the cost to actually execute something when it ties directly to what your users are doing is an interesting challenge.
The API-based ones. If you do open source ones, you have to kind of put in the upfront investment of GPUs, which are very hard to get and they are expensive right now. So there are trade-offs that you need to just balance and work through it depending on use case.
Right. Fascinating. Maybe if we turn back to, and you hit on this a little bit, we turn back to the personas you talked about, the nurse, the underwriter, the salesperson. You've got this sort of near-term vision. I'm curious to see kind of how far this extrapolates out in the future, or if you have kind of a bigger future vision of how AI works with people, particularly in the enterprise in the future.
Yeah, I think there are two things we are getting. I mean, what we are seeing the work and the kind of the client conversations that we are doing. I think there are two dominant themes that are kind of emerging. Right, one is most organizations. So for high leverage workers, and this is much more of a bet we are making for high leverage workers, right? You will need companions because there are fewer in numbers and they make a huge difference. A pricing analyst can make a massive difference on the top bottom line of any organization, or a salesperson can, or a nurse can in a hospital. And I mean, we talked about the thing, or a educator in an insurance company. I mean, those are very, very high roles, and those are hard roles, very complex roles. So, and by and large, those roles don't have enough tooling available to assist them, right? Apart from BI dashboards and things like that, right? And so in some ways, we are serving our highest leverage workers with not enough tools, and we try to automate out the most commoditized people, kind of part of the company. I mean, that's essentially kind of how it works. So the idea is, can you change the balance and you kind of provide the right tooling, as in form of AI companions, so that they can actually amplify their work even better. That's kind of bucket number one, and I think we'll see that. We will also see a whole new flavor of hyper automation, right? Which will kind of make that, which will be a productivity play. I think both those things will work simultaneously. So I think it's evolving in that direction slowly and slowly. There is a third thing that is actually happening more and more, and that's actually led by, I think, the innovation officer, the CIOs, CTOs, which is, I think, eventually these language models and these generative AI tools become a brain of the organization. They become the operating system on which the organization works. Because if you really think about it, the methodologies, the knowledge, all the knowledge graph, there is of how the actually work gets done in an organization. It's in people's brain right now, right? You change it. That's why, like a 1 month customer care agent versus a 5-month-old customer care agent, you can see a huge difference. And then the reason is that kind of there's a lot of implicit knowledge that is there. And I think where organizations will eventually end up, that's obviously my point of view, is there will be an organizational brain that will get that developed, where a lot of the implicit knowledge will get explicit as people use these tools everywhere. And there will be essentially an organization brain that is there. And that is going to drive a different kind of productivity, because we just haven't had the intelligence at the center at the edges till today. And so the future of work, I think, and it'll take some time. It's not tomorrow. But a lot of the piece parts that we are all starting to put together whether it's like in Copilot, Microsoft is kind of launching their own thing connected to Office 365, or how every like Salesforce will do their thing. So there will be these tooling available everywhere. But essentially, what all of this tooling will do is kind of create a digital knowledge graph of the organization. And that once you start leveraging that, you change everything in an organization. I think it'll change org charts. It will change a bunch of things. We are on probably a 10-year journey towards that. But these are the foundations that it will happen, and a lot of these things will die. And then copilots and hyper automation, all of these will play a big role.
Yeah, the notion of kind of the brain or the enterprise OS is really interesting. Especially, I think there's not just how you bring somebody up to speed, but how you then can leverage the collective intelligence, the collective near real-time intelligence of an organization. What are the trends in my client bases? How does that apply across segments, across roles? How can I then use that to talk to my client right in a sales role about the next thing? It's an exponential sort of factor of improvement, competitiveness, et cetera.
Exactly. And the tooling is not there. I mean, all of these things are developing right now. I mean, we have like piece parts of it. Like we have the pen and we have the nib, but not the whole pen. We don't have the ink sometimes. We are kind of trying to put it all together. So all of this thing kind of flows in the way we want it to be, and it'll take some time to get there. But it's undoubtedly that's where it's going.
Right. Oh, that's interesting. Well, I'm sure one of the biggest culprits is disparate, data sources kind of all across the enterprise. You're trying to start bringing them together and get access to them in a meaningful way.
Absolutely. That's going to be a big part of it. Or keep it distributed where they are, but kind of being able to go out and find information from them when you require them. There are architectures that will evolve on that front also.
Interesting. So from that discussion, I think it's very clear on how it provides value for the enterprise. I'm curious, you get down to the individual level, right? That nurse, that underwriter. How do you see kind of value accruing to them as an individual and how it impacts their job and what they do?
I mean, the salespeople we work with, they get more commissions.
Okay, that's the easy one. Yeah, fair enough.
You go after the easier ones. I mean, there are roles that are. I mean, the nurses, if you're able to go and do more. I mean, we do work in like prior authorization. So you go to a doctor and you just say you need an MRI, and suddenly the doctor will say, hey, listen, I need to go and check with your insurance company whether this is kind of covered and what I need to submit to kind of cover that. That actually takes a PA or a nurse a fair amount of time to put the justification together, send it, and everything. So every time they are doing all of that work, they are not actually seeing a patient, or they are not kind of building a relationship there. So we have a prior authorization copilot, which basically simplifies that entire process for the nurse. So they are able to kind of go do these prior authorizations a lot faster, much more accurate one, more revenue, makes it easier for the nurse, and they're working. We already talked about salespeople or these underwriters who are reading contracts versus actually doing the underwriting and kind of understanding kind of what the business context is for this. So for high leverage workers, the benefit is in some ways in medicine they get to practice at the top of the license, right? And everyone, the whole Maslow theory of you want to be practicing at the top of your license and not doing stuff that like you don't want to be doing, but it's kind of part of the process. That's kind of that's very clear. When we go to the hyper automation side of things, it is all about, I think there's a lot of processing people will become investigators, because I think there will be a lot more exception based workflows that will happen, versus because there'll be a lot more straight through processing that will just the next level of there. But that problem has been around for some time, around kind of how do we kind of upskill this thing. But at an individual level, depending on where you are, where like how critical you are and how leverage you have from an organization perspective, it's either amazing news, in my mind, because from a skill set perspective, from practicing on the top of the license, to the problems that you always had is, listen, we need to kind of go into the upskilling into the next wave of things, that will just get accelerated. So depending on where you are, I think it will impact different.
Interesting. Well, it sounds sort of reading between some of those, though, it sounds like when you think about the enterprise adopting AI and really sort of demonstrating to the rest of the enterprise's real business cases there, focusing on those high leverage roles that have, I don't know if it's easy, but have more clear cut and straightforward, benefits that accrue from them is the way for those organizations to go.
Yeah, and which is where we have started focusing on, because there it's a win-win-win for everyone,
Right.
right? And there's a value, and I think those tend to be normally in the front office. So there's all kinds of things kind of that is add up there. Yeah.
What do you see? Maybe last question on this topic. What do you see as the sort of the biggest challenge that you've seen enterprises have when they're looking at getting into AI and really starting to implement it in their business?
It's just two things. One, there is a lot of confusion and noise, right? And that's number one.
Understatement, Amaresh.
Yeah, and I can see that. We do this for a living right now, and we literally are 24/7 thinking about this, doing about this, and it's hard to keep up for us, right? And someone whose job is to kind of run a sales team, or job is to run a pricing team, whatever, and then you are kind of thrown in, or even if you're a CIO, you have your subsystems down or something like that, and you have to deal with this, and plus you have to think about all of this. It's just impossible, right? That's kind of number one. And then obviously, and it's such a big thing, is like there are so many vendors, so many technology companies, everyone wants to have a point of view, and that, so it's very confusing. If you're on the other side, if you're kind of trying to figure it out, what's there, what's real, what's not. That's one. That's, I think, one. Second, it's an early stage technology, right? It's early stage technology that moving at an exponential speed, and they were sharing. I mean, there's only two times to get in, either too early or too late here, right? So that's kind of the second, and the third is I have the org design that is being set up, right? I mean, the technology. One is, think about it. Uh, OpenAI released GPT 3.5, which is kind of the start of this whole era, like basically last November, right? Just around a year ago, right? The budgets for 24 has already been frozen, right? And we are cutting and everything, right? The 23, 20, when 22, so 23 has been there, and suddenly this thing becomes a big deal. People don't have, like, okay, where is the innovation funds? Where do the So there's this whole how organizations work, and how do I kind of prove value, do this, all of that stuff. That itself is a barrier. So confusion, noise, uh, early stage technology, and of kind of not, it's not like it's very clear on where all the value is going to be, and all the things that needs to get figured out is very clear. And third is you get into the org structures of and the budgeting cycles that we're dealing with, combine all three together, and it's like, okay, kind of, come on, you want me to do things, where do I start, and what do I do?
Interesting. Yeah, the outpacing the technology outpacing the budget cycle is a particularly interesting one, because some firms will figure it out, other firms won't, and you could start seeing,
And you can start seeing that. I mean, some people are, okay, let's kind of make it there, or some people are like hiding it under, okay, we are doing data transformation or this thing, let's kind of do this a little. I mean, and you have to be creative. I mean, in this thing. And in general, this is the first time. Normally, you would have you send these things to your head of innovation, right? I mean, say, okay, we'll talk to you 3 years later and see what you find out, right? Here, 3 months later, someone is kind of releasing something, and they are like, okay, I'm already behind. So there's a FOMO and a fear factor kind of going on. This is all are natural things, and things will probably generally settle down, and we'll probably find a rhythm. But that's where we are, at least for the last 12 months, and maybe the next 12.
Well, it is interesting. One of the things that I've seen is talking to heads of innovation. It seems like they're almost exclusively focusing on AI right now and excluding almost everything else.
If I'm the head of innovation, this is like, there's no other technology which is going to become as real as quickly that I don't have to sell to the organization. That's anything on my portfolio. So of course, yes.
Interesting. Interesting. It impacts your agenda pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Just maybe pivoting a little bit, if we think about financial services for a moment, right? Big, complex, IT driven industry, lots and lots of data, but still large patches of it have significant amounts of unstructured data.
Yeah.
You know, especially in the lending space, the credit space. How, and there's certainly other spaces, the front office, alpha generation, financial advice. What do you see as the way your solution can kind of help solve big problems in the financial services space?
Yeah, I mean, I think you lay that out. I mean, this broader notion around people will develop some version of the brain or the kind of the platform. That's kind of one, which obviously we have, which we can accelerate that journey, or we can just kind of get you started on that journey much faster on that. And that will be all these use cases around, I think, unstructured data. If you really think about it, whilst financial services have been very, very ahead of managing structured data, and they've just generally been ahead of data analytics and tech. Unstructured data is completely unsolved, and a big chunk of all workflow process, a lot of the workflow processes, consumer driven or this thing, because of regulation and other things, is a lot of unstructured data, right? So that's kind of one big area. So we just hired someone from one of the largest banks who was building a non-structured data Gen AI platform for them, right? And that's kind of the idea is that that's going to be a big area to reduce cycle times, whether it's in lending, whether it's in more like kind of structured products. I mean, just anywhere where the electronics end-to-end like digitization hasn't happened, right? That's kind of bucket number one that I think will be there. Second is this on the alpha gen piece of it, which is kind of what we do, kind of sales copilots that we have done. A lot of the sales effort is understanding the same unstructured data from a client base perspective, right? Like one of the examples we have is, and you can translate that into from an investment perspective also. One of the examples we have is, hey, we have a company that essentially sells wherever there is an ESG agenda for the client, right? And something gets triggered, right? They're in the waste management business. So whether there is a EPA violation that actually happens, or in the 10K they go and start committing to a carbon net neutral thing, or a wastewater effort that they start somewhere. So we have essentially built an ESG GPT, right? And which is always scouring their potential client base. And you can think that trust is the same thing as from an investment perspective, the same idea. And you are looking for that, and then you are basically on the right timing, on the right triggers, they are able to kind of go and to make an outreach. So there is, in some ways, what you're trying to do is unstructured data combing to get demand signals or investment signals, which will kind of create alpha, right? Those would be kind of the use cases that I'm translating that. And the third one, we've always talked about personalization, right? One-to-one personalization, right? Whether it's in financial advice, like kind of your wealth manager. I mean, we talked about all these robo-advisors. Now think about robo-advisors, which can be like so super, like one-on-one kind of a conversation that you could have, and you could create all these portfolios at the back, which are tax loss harvested and everything at the back. A lot of the innovation is already happening. Now you can connect it to the one-to-one advice on front, which is a great use case. I'm sure we are going to all see, if already not there, like some version of advisor GPT, either supporting advisors right now to raise the quality of all advisors to the next level, or directly to the consumer. I think we'll see both versions fairly soon. Or any kind of marketing customization, like offers, whether it's credit card offers, to any kind of all offer customizations that we are going to say. Like there was a great example, even in OpenAI Dev Day. I mean, you saw Coca-Cola kind of had a Diwali greeting, which is auto-generated for India versus which were different country with different festival for a different place. Same kind of a construct. So the way you are able to kind of go and do these auto-generation and move one-on-one targeting, that's kind of what would be there. I mean, these are like some of the obvious use cases. And if you go down to the more nitty-gritty areas where there's a lot of value in the very small things, you'll find a lot.
So I'm curious, a lot of those will really kind of play well into the high leverage users and personas. I mean, certainly financial advice, alpha, unstructured data, being able to accelerate cycles. I'm interested as well, maybe, do you see what sort of opportunity you see, if any, in more the operation side? So client onboarding, investment operation, trade clearing, settlement, that sort of thing.
Basically, any process related stuff, like, I mean, contact centers is going to be one big one that you see. I mean, that's just obvious that we are going to see all of it, right? I mean, in terms of suddenly opening up omni-channel contact centers. And the thing is, some of the theory we have been talking about for some time, the technology is kind of making it easier and easier and better, right? IVRs will go away. I think it'll be a different kind of IVR interfaces that I think we'll start seeing. So I think those things will be there. But you're right, on the onboarding kind of use cases there around kind of, or KYC onboarding. Think about all those kind of operational use cases where a big piece of it is actually a lot of the financial setup processes are data flows.
Yeah.
right? And a lot of it is unstructured data flows actually. So I mean, you can just go put two and two together. I would say all kinds of workflow platforms now will hook into all these kind of Gen AI kind of copilots, task level copilots all over the place to make things faster, better, easier without question level.
Interesting. Interesting. Maybe a last question. If you were to, I'll put a constraint in this question just to make it interesting. If you were to give an enterprise sort of one bit of advice, if they're thinking about Gen AI in their enterprise, what would that be?
Start working on it on use cases. I mean, it's not, and don't set, I mean, basically live experiments,
Mhm.
right? So, I mean, production level experiments. I've never seen so many production level experiments kind of going on at the same time. See, I think it's intuitive that it will make things better. We don't exactly know how, and we also know there are some organization structure that might need to change to accommodate that. Some of the technology might not perfectly work. So find and there are ethics kind of and risks kind of things that are associated. So choose use cases that are more internal facing, put human in the loop. So there is kind of human. So that's why kind of make it easier for humans to do certain jobs which matter, and test it and learn from it, because the tech stack everything will evolve. Everything, the org side will evolve, the people process tech, all sides will evolve. But as I said, if you don't do it, someone else, I mean, it is I think it is almost like the analogy you have is, I don't think organizations will feel it like a typhoon or a big storm. They will almost feel it like a termite. Things will just kind of go and gnaw and gnaw, and suddenly it will collapse. And I think we're going to see a lot more. I mean, I like the termite analogy a lot more, though it feels like there's a lot of changes going on. I think a lot of small changes will kind of add up, and things will change. So I think the one piece of advice will experiment and test from whatever vantage point you are starting with, bigger or smaller. Uh, and because I've talked to 5 million, $10 million revenue companies, and I've talked to Fortune 10 companies, and they all are kind of in the same place. And so once you get started working in that, you understand a lot, and you will have a much better appreciation for what to drive and how to drive. The change and people side of it is going to be the most important thing eventually. Technology will get figured out, and if you're not in the mix there, it'll because you cannot shorten that time.
Interesting. No, that's great advice. Well, Amaresh, thank you for spending time with us today. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dave. Always fun chatting with you.